Welcome to Global Connections on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. Today, we'll talk about who is supporting Trump these days. Have there been changes in his base? Our guest for the show is DeSoto Brown, historian. Welcome to the show, DeSoto.
Thank you for having me, Jay. We will have lots to talk about, as we always do.
So, Trump has had a profoundly disruptive effect on the country and on Europe, for that matter. And we need to follow the reactions and effects his actions have had and will have on the political landscape in this country and on the base. We can't take the base for granted, and he can't either. We have to identify the changes in the dynamics in the base. And that's what this discussion is all about. So let's talk about historically what the base was as we last looked at it. What is the base, DeSoto?
The base can also be described as MAGA. That's an acronym that's been in use for many years now. Make America Great Again is what that comes from. And that was Trump's slogan. And Make America Great Again is not happening as much as was claimed. However, the base is no base is ever monolithic and without any variation. So, for example, the base includes people you wouldn't necessarily think would be part of it, considering the general prejudices that the base holds. So, for example, to everybody's surprise, mine included, there are non-Caucasian, non-Haole people in his space. There are a lot of people who are not economically well off, who are thinking that this is going to be the way they're going to become well off. But then, of course, there are extremely wealthy billionaire oligarchs that are also part of his support, which is the exact opposite. Basically, these people are politically conservative. They are easily swayed by statements coming from Trump and his other sycophants. They are easily told who to hate. They're easily riled up to be focused on a scapegoat. These are the bad people. We have to hate them. We have to dislike them. We have to suppress them. We have to remove their rights. We have to deport them. We have to shut them up. All of that stuff. There's a strong focus on the enemies, whoever they may be, whoever they've been whipped up to think about. And a lot of these people are very trusting. A lot of these people are looking for a big, important, strong, they think, figure who's going to be doing stuff for them against everybody they don't like. They are thinking, and they are under the delusion that Donald Trump, as a self-proclaimed billionaire, is just like them because he voices his prejudices and he voices his hatreds and he voices negativity about other people that they don't like. Therefore, they think, oh, yeah, he's one of us. And yes, he's a billionaire, but he's got our interests at heart. Well, they're going to be discovering more and more that he doesn't care about them at all. He doesn't have their interests at heart. And even though he talks the way they want him to, he's not one of them and they're not one of him. And well, we'll keep talking as we go through this.
What really surprised me back a year or two ago is when, the Latino community joined him in large numbers. And these people are, from Latin America mostly, and they, have been a target. The Latinos have been a target of his ire, his hatred, his racism, and yet the Latinos joined him. And I think that's really worth some discussion. Also, some African Americans joined him, which was also very interesting. And some Asians joined him. And I can't figure out, maybe together we can figure out what the common denominator is, why they would join him and become part of his base. Was it hatred? Was it, racism? Are they racist too? What brings them to him? There's got to be something that he says or does that appeals to them, that has them come on. I was working on the theory for a while that it was one issue alone. So say the Latinos are largely Catholic, and the Latinos didn't like abortion, and therefore on that one issue they would come over to him, disregarding all the other issues, and join the base. And maybe, for some of them, that's true. but there's so many of them, and many of them are not so heavily Catholic that it really doesn't make sense anymore. So it must be something else. So what makes people whose interests are obviously not aligned with his and his rhetoric come over to him and join his base? What was the phenomenon that connected that?
Well, in a lot of ways, it's incomprehensible. I mean, we're just going to come out and say that there are things we're never going to be able to understand. Certainly, there are a number of Latinos who are refugees from countries which are repressive and which, like in the case of Venezuela and Cuba, were communist. And they see, I believe, Donald Trump being strongly anti communist and standing up strongly to the strongman of their former countries. So, and that's very true, particularly in Florida, where there are a lot of Cuban and Venezuelan refugees. And they look back at their homelands and say, we can't let that happen here. Donald Trump is anti communist, anti socialist, and he's going to make sure that doesn't happen. Well, the ultimate irony, of course, is that a lot of those people who were on sort of special permits to be allowed in the United States have now had that special status revoked. Over 500,000 people like that, a number of which I'm sure were Trump supporters saying, yes, big daddy Trump is going to keep things the way we want them. And now they're illegal. Now they're illegal aliens. I mean, what a slap in the face. But again, how could you be so ignorant as to think he wasn't going to do this to you? Another really important part of this entire phenomenon is that Trump supporters were very happy as long as they thought it was going to be somebody else who was being targeted. And it was very easy to justify, well, he doesn't mean me, he means them. He means the Venezuelan criminals. He means the Venezuelan or the Mexican drug cartel criminals. That's who they're going to go after. And I'm not one of them. Therefore, nothing's going to happen to me. And I'm just going to benefit from all of this strong arm, powerful tactics. No, it's not just the bad people. It's not just the criminals. And he never said that it was just going to be the criminals. But people deluded themselves that, oh, yeah, he doesn't mean me. This is true of the base in general. And this is what's going to be happening to the base in general. Right now, it is some of the Latinos who are really feeling it, who formerly thought he didn't mean them. But as Social Security, as a specific target, really begins to fall apart, it's going to be a lot of poor people who are Trump supporters thinking, oh no, he's going to bring wealth to us because he's going to cut taxes. He's cutting back on government. And the government just takes all our money and doesn't leave enough for us. Well, the government also pays you your Social Security, brainiac, and they're clearly targeting it. They're clearly breaking Social Security up. And those of you who Trump supporters were thinking, I'm going to become wealthy, I'm going to have more money. No, he's going to cut off your Social Security. And if that's your only income, and if you're a poor person living in a trailer and you think Trump likes you, Trump doesn't like you. Trump doesn't care about you. And you are just as deluded as the Latinos who thought, no, he doesn't mean me. He means deporting all of them. If you're thinking, oh, he doesn't mean me, he's just going to cut my taxes to me. No, he's not. And he's in the process of doing it right this second.
There are three things that come to mind from what you said. The first, not necessarily in order of importance, but the first you raised in my mind is the question of seniority. So if I'm a Latino, then I feel I have a seniority in the country. I've been here for a while. I paid my dues. And these other Latinos, they're junior to me. And I want to be in the top of the heap. I want to be like the holy guys. I want to, integrate myself into the social fabric. I don't want them competing with me, and I don't want them dragging me down. I want to be at the top of call it the Latino heap. Okay, so I resent any other Latino that comes in before me. That doesn't that's not that's not sui generis, because it's happened all through American history. If I'm an Italian that arrived yesterday, I'm junior to the Italians that arrived in 1870. The same thing with the Jews and the Germans. It's a question of seniority. So I think that plays here in this process you've described. The other thing that comes to mind is this question of wealth. If it's kind of if you convince people it's a zero sum game, and to the extent there are other people competing for the dollars that I might earn, and we get rid of them or we bar them, then I get more money and I can be wealthier. So I resent and oppose anybody junior to me or anybody who would compete for my share of the national economy. That's flawed, of course. All of this is flawed. But you can see people saying, not only am I senior, but I have the chance under what Trump is saying to be wealthier than I am now. If we can just get rid of these other guys who are competing for my salary, my work, my employment. That's the second point that comes to mind. The third point is derived out of one of our hosts who has appeared on this show over the past few years, over the past through Trump years. He lives in Varanasi, India, and he's a business person. He owns a business that he inherited from his father, who died in COVID. Yeah, and his thing is he likes Trump. He liked Trump during the first term, and he likes Trump now. And if you ask him, why do you like Trump? He says, as a lot of people in this world say, because he is strong. He's unambiguous. He's unambivalent. He takes a position, and it is a position of strength, and he sticks with it. And is that strength that attracts my friend in India, but also a lot of people in this world. If they see somebody who is amorphous, like Joe Biden, who changes his mind, who is soft and warm, but not strong sometimes, then he's going to be drawn to the guy who is the strong leader. And this is probably a factor to explain the rise of autocracies around the world, because an autocrat is always, quote, strong, end quote. Not thoughtful, not kind, not decent, but strong. And I think those three factors, and I can't say which one is the most important and how they interact. Maybe they all exist, and it's a combination of these things and what you were saying. But I think all these three things are in play when you try to understand not only why people supported Trump in the beginning, but why they still support him.
Yeah, and you raised excellent points, and you're absolutely correct on all of those. First of all, everybody likes to be able to look down on somebody else. Everybody likes to feel superior to somebody else. All of us do, and therefore, if politically there's some other group that you can point at and say they are inferior to me, they are bad, they are wrong. If we get rid of them, everything will be okay. That is total normal politics, unfortunately, in a lot of aspects and in a lot of places throughout the world. Therefore, if you're part of the scapegoated group, you're suffering, but the other people are saying you deserve it, and I feel better because you're suffering. Second of all, you also have, as you just said, this hierarchy. Humans build hierarchies regardless of what our cultures are, regardless of where we are, regardless of all this other stuff. We put ourselves into different castes, into different levels of society. And sometimes it's based on your birth and the fact that you are royalty. Sometimes it's based on the fact that you have a lot of money and that you are therefore powerful economically. But still, this continues to happen. And it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody who's got more power and is better off is a smarter or better person. It's a lot of serendipity and just chance that these things happen this way. Donald Trump is not smarter than lots of people. Donald Trump is not better than lots of people. Donald Trump is stupid in a lot of ways. But Donald Trump portrays strength through being crude, offensive, mocking, demeaning, belittling to other people, having a loud, blustering voice, and just in general being a narcissist who thinks he's the smartest man in the world. And therefore, he goes around making pronouncements and again uses his supposed billions of dollars of wealth to back this up. And people see somebody being rude and mean as being powerful. Now, the reality is that Donald Trump says offensive, stupid things, but then changes his mind constantly, but then backtracks constantly. And the fact that he lies all the time means that he constantly is making up stories, lying about different things, forgetting that he lied about something earlier and making up another lie. People just let all that slide without any criticism, without any real logical thought about, wait a minute, he just lied about that. Yesterday he said this, today he says that. They just go with, he's big and strong and he's going to powerfully protect us and he's going to do things to the bad people and he's going to uplift the good people and I'm one of the good people. Well, if you use your brain and you examine what he says and what he does, I mean, particularly with tariffs, the tariffs are coming and going and coming and going just at his whim. And nobody tells him otherwise. He just has been in a position of power his entire life, being from a wealthy family, constantly demanding things, getting what he wanted. He thinks that's the way the world works. And one of the things that is the most offensive to me is the slogan that's being used by Trump supporters, and they're wearing T-shirts that say it, "Daddy's home," meaning Trump is our daddy. Trump is our leader. He's like the omnipotent father who's going to take care of all of us, and we're his kids. A lot of people really want to be told what to do. A lot of people don't want the responsibility of their own lives. A lot of people don't want the responsibility of having to think critically, make decisions, and then have to deal with their own decisions. They want someone to take that responsibility away from them and just do it for them and then tell them what to do. And religion serves this purpose in for a lot of people. You can just say, it's in God's hands, it's out of my hands. I will pray, but I will be obedient and everything will be all right because God takes care of it. Exactly the same thing with Trump. I'll turn all that power over to him. I'll turn all that responsibility over to him so I don't have to do it. And I know he'll do the right thing for me because he's told me the way I should think and therefore I'm going to go along with it. Well, this is the result. You have a maniac who nobody dares to speak against. Nobody dares to say, you're thinking of something stupid. That's not going to work. You're thinking of something that's going to damage the country. Don't do it. Meanwhile, others, millions of others are saying, whatever he says, he has a godlike knowledge and a godlike power, and I will do whatever he says as I gaze upon him with adoration and pride.
You talk about power, and I think of the moth and the flame. Just as people are attracted to the strong man, inherent in that is they are attracted to power, even if it's against their interest, and they fly into the flame. The moth is killed by flying into the flame. There's something bizarre about it because it's not survival, but that's what happens, and I think that's what happens to people. So I would add sort of a half step on the whole thing about strongman. I would say power is what you were talking about. People are attracted to power. But there's one other thing that comes up from what you said. I'm tracking today and what you were saying, DeSoto. It's really you're very stimulating on this conversation. Okay, in the 30s and maybe before, and maybe in many places still, increasingly, there's this thing about Schadenfreude. And a lot of academics have studied this. A lot of psychologists, social psychologists have studied this. But, the species is somehow attracted to the misery of others. So Schadenfreude is to revel in the misery of others. So Hitler, found his scapegoats and he made them very unhappy. And inherent in the German reaction to that was, okay, well, let him do that because that makes me feel good to see other people suffer. And whether they cast it that way or some kind of justification, rationalization of what's going on, that's been studied, and we know that's part of the human condition, Schadenfreude. So when he shows you voluntarily on his own initiative these poor people, the quote gang members, yeah, who are being sent to El Salvador, who are made to crouch down, who are given these awful haircuts, these irregular haircuts, who are bound and tied, and who are sent into a prison where they can never communicate with friends or family or lawyers again. They're really being made miserable. This is like being sent to hell. And it's not the only example, I should add. But the whole El Salvador experience is a Schadenfreude experience. Why I say that is because he is publicizing it. And there are people in this country that like to see that the same way they like to see these dark movies on Netflix and Prime. There's a sort of gratification of seeing all the killing and the guns and people suffering and being tortured and all this. It's why those movies are so popular. I really hate to see that. I hate to see that from the very disturbing aspect of the art, and the fact that people like it and they watch it and it's popular. And what does that tell us about us as a society and us, as a species? But he's capitalizing on that. He understands Schadenfreude. There was a woman who was a Canadian, and she came from Canada to visit a friend or a business associate in Los Angeles. And when she went back, this is not coming into the country, Mooney was her name. And when she went back, she got caught by Homeland Security. And for reasons never, ever explained to her, she was put in a holding room with one light bulb that never went off, and she couldn't sleep. And there were 3 or 4 other women similarly situated in that room. And the food was, what shall I say, meager. And the staff, the Homeland Security staff, wouldn't say anything to her. They wouldn't say hello. They wouldn't respond to her in any way. They were apparently under instructions not to engage whatsoever, completely alienate. And she was left there without any possibility of communicating with. This is an ordinary woman, right? An ordinary Canadian woman in her 30s. She was left there without any possibility of finding out why she was there. By the way, she never did find out. And talking to her friends, her family, a lawyer that might make inquiries on her behalf. And she was left there for 12 days. And furthermore, when we examine the experience of this woman, we find there are other people who have had the same experience. Thanks to Homeland Security, we are being dehumanized to treat people this way. This is reminiscent of separating the children from their parents. It is dehuman, unhuman, inhumane. And yet that's what, and we hear about it. We see it on the media, we hear about it. And I suspect that it's Schadenfreude. It's the same thing. It's not that we hate him and criticize him for allowing this to happen in Homeland Security, for conducting themselves this way. It's that he wants us to know. He wants us to be terrified. He wants to generate fear among the population of this country, not just immigrants and migrants, but of this country, so we don't cross him. And that's part of his thing. And I'm here to tell you, I think that's a factor that makes some people like him, that makes some people stick in his base. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. Because as I've said, everybody wants to be able to look down on somebody else. Everybody wants to be able to say, at least I'm not like that person. I may have these faults, but I'm not like them. So if you are guided into who you're supposed to dislike, first of all, you'll take pleasure in their displeasure. You'll take pleasure in the fact that they are being hurt, because it's It's supposed to be that way. There's also, as things get more and more horrible, you become grateful that it isn't happening to you. So as the process gets worse, you will inform on other people. You'll push somebody else into the punishment to escape it yourself. And with gratitude, you'll say, at least today, I'm not in a prison like all these other people are. You can look back at multiple other countries that have been through this exact process. And one of the crazy things is that as it just snowballs, it gets more and more insane. And as the leader at the top becomes more paranoid and starts finding enemies all over the place and starts picking on people who were formerly one of their closest confidants and one of their best people, who was so supportive for years and all that. And suddenly they'll say, you know what, you're trying to overthrow me. I'm going to have you murdered. Then the country starts to go to hell more and more. Um, but nobody can stop it. And one of the things that happened in Russia in the late 1930s, Stalin was the supreme dictator. And Stalin gets paranoid, and Stalin starts to say, because he is a dictator, he's always watching his back and thinking somebody might try to overthrow me. Therefore, he starts arbitrarily picking on all his high ranking generals and all these other people in the government. And by the time he's finished with his purges, he's killed off a lot of his high ranking military people. Then what happens? Germany attacks in 1941, and now his military is in total disarray because he killed all the people who knew how to run stuff. Well, this is what happens. You destroy your country by doing crazy stuff like this. Everybody either goes along with it because they're happy that you're picking on the bad guys that they've been told are the inferior bad guys, or they go along with it because they're too scared and they're too desperate to protect their own selves. And even as all this was going on, any sane person can look at this and say, there's no way the country's going to survive. Everybody's going to suffer. If you think you're going to come out of this okay, you're not. But they'll still go along with it because they have no choice. Because, again, the momentum is such that they can't stop it as individuals. They can't stop the snowball rolling. They just have to go along with it and get dragged down, even as they know they're being dragged down into destruction and their own traumas. If you look at Germany at the end of World War II, it was absolutely in wreckage. And people had been cheering Hitler on the whole time as, look, he's saving us. He's making us strong. He's going against the bad guys. We're going to rule the world. He's told us we're the super race. The Aryans are the ones to lead the entire world and oppress everybody else. We're the new kingdom. We're the new, Roman Empire. And in 1945, the place is trashed. People are starving to death. They're living in piles of rubble. They knew that this was going on. They couldn't stop it. And so the power, the whole finding the scapegoats and killing them off, gradually you destroy everything, but you can still delude yourself, or you can still deny everything to the point where you are still going along with that strong leader, even though clearly in front of you, you're being destroyed. And that's the terrible thing that I'm sure you can see along with me as the inevitable thing that we're going to come to if things don't get stopped, if things are not put right. It's destruction. And it's destruction of individual people. It's destruction of the economy. It's destruction of the environment. It's all kinds of destruction. And yet there are people who still will be waving the Trump flag, even as the Titanic is plunging down to the bottom of the ocean. They're going to be saying, yeah, we're all on board. Everything's great.
Your comments make me think of a couple of other things. One is telling on people, because that breaks down relationships, it breaks down the society, it breaks down the family. That was something that happened in the movie, The Garden of the Finzi Contini,
Mm.
which was a story of a Jewish family outside of Rome who had a big villa. They thought they were impervious because they were oligarchs in their day. But one day, the Germans came, and that was the end of them. They were all taken away. And in that movie, part of it is that if you didn't like your neighbor, um, or if you responded to their demands that you tell on people, including your parents, your children, your relatives, then you should tell. And you felt that somehow that was going to help you. Of course, it never, ever did. And this idea of telling on people is very troublesome. I know a guy who got an email or to the federal government, and the email said, "We know there are DEI people in your organization. We know they're trying to cover up their DEI-ness, and we want you to tell on them. We want you to turn them in. You have 7 days to do that. And if you don't do that, there will be consequences." Holy moly, that's the same thing. Okay. Second thing that comes to mind is the whole thing about a scapegoat. That's Hitler did that, and Trump is doing it, and he is finding scapegoats, and with all the mechanisms that we've been talking about, it all fits very nicely. You find a group that others will not like, they will want to have an angle, a superiority, a seniority to them. They will want to exhibit Schadenfreude against them. And at the end of the day, this group becomes a target, like the Jews were in Germany. They weren't really trying to bring Hitler down in any way, but they were a scapegoat. And I believe that to the extent that you could define Trump as a racist, and you can, he is going to be looking for scapegoats. He's already found some scapegoats. Look, Latin Americans, right? But many others. He's going to be moving, as he does in the news cycle. He's going to be moving from one group to another and scapegoating, one group at a given time, and then moving to another group. So I think that's all part of this thing. And as you say, this is pretty scary stuff. We have seen it before, and he, for all his ignorance, he understands this at some fundamental Lord of the Flies level. And I think he's playing it out. And as any pathological person, the more he succeeds, the more he will try. And we're watching that right now.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I ask you this. Maybe there's hope here. Maybe there's some light at the end of some tunnel, although it's hard to see it actually right now, to suggest that people would become enlightened, would realize what he is doing, would realize that he's not at all fulfilling his campaign promises, and that they joined his base because they thought he would help them, but he's not helping them at all. As a matter of fact, he's working in open season against their interests, and they may be leaving the base. And so we should be looking for incidences of that, examples of that. But do you find any examples? What are those examples? And how serious and how promising are those examples?
Well, you're absolutely right. There's a whole bunch of that you just said. Absolutely true. And I want to mention Schadenfreude. We're feeling it too. We're feeling it too when a Trump supporter has their face slapped, figuratively speaking, to realize what a terrible mistake they made in voting for him. Because all of a sudden, and it's going to take something catastrophic for them to come to their senses, because otherwise they'll just go along with all the rest of the gang saying, yes, he's great. And then when finally, suddenly the money that they were expecting doesn't come because they're a farmer and they were expecting large federal money to come to them for either them buying new equipment or for the crop that they're producing, which then the government buys and distributes to poor people, and suddenly they're not getting it. And suddenly, wait, that wasn't supposed to happen to me. I'm one of your supporters. You weren't supposed to do that to me. Or it's when the person whose family member or spouse is an immigrant and who is rah rah for Trump, suddenly that spouse is detained and sent out of the United States because they're not considered legal. And suddenly that person receives the slap in the face of, but you weren't supposed to do that to me. You weren't supposed to do that to my wife or my husband or my girlfriend or my boyfriend or my aunt or uncle or grandmother or anybody like that. It was supposed to be them, not me. Or if, and I mentioned earlier, Social Security right now is under severe attack. And Social Security is the lifeline for a lot of elderly people who have no money. If Social Security doesn't pay them their monthly amount, they are on the street. They have nothing to eat and they have no rent money. Those people who are Trump supporters are going to get the biggest slap in the face of all. And it's on the verge of happening. And that is going to turn a lot of people around. Now, for people like you and me, Schadenfreude is going to be, we told you he was going to do this to you. He told you he was going to do this to you. And you wouldn't believe us. You wouldn't believe him when he told you he was going to become a dictator. And now, finally, you can't turn the other way and say it's not happening because now it's happening to you. And the old quote from the Nazi era, first they came for those people and I didn't speak up. Then they came for those people and I didn't speak up. Then they came for me and there was nobody left to speak up for me. Well, this is what's going to happen. And a lot of people who said, no, I'm special. He won't do anything to me. It's just them. Suddenly it is going to be you. Suddenly you are going to be one of them, the bad people, the inferior people, the wrong people. And that's when it's going to really hit people hard. I'm more conscious about Social Security right now because I am 71 years old and I have put off taking my Social Security payments as long as possible because the longer you wait, the more the money builds up and the more money you will end up getting every month. I have to start taking my payments by the time I'm 72. I will be, in theory, in a few months, except I don't know if I'm going to get them now. I'm in a situation where the Social Security money is not life or death for me, and I'm very fortunate. But a lot of people don't have that leeway. And a lot of people who thought Trump was only going to help them are going to discover that Trump, they are going to get the slap in the face. People who told them he's going to do this to you, we're going to have that pleasure of their sudden painful realization that we were right and they were wrong. And they're going to learn their lesson.
Reaction. Number one, a lot of this Schadenfreude and fear depends on the media. In other words, if Trump has control of the media and he tells you the frightening part of it, the story of the Canadian woman, the story of the people in Ohio eating dogs and cats. I mean, if he controls the media, especially with lies, he can control public opinion. He can create Schadenfreude. And that happened in Germany. And that happens in every autocracy where the autocrat is interested in trying to control the message and therefore public opinion. And you can see that he's doing that now. And then out of Shakespeare, out of Hamlet, wasn't it? The first thing we do is kill all the lawyers. Why? Because the lawyers can defend us and go to court and, protect our rights. Who else? Who else? It won't be the Department of Justice. That's gone. It won't be the FBI. Forget it. And so you have to attack the lawyers. A good autocrat has to attack the lawyers. And that's exactly what he's doing. That thing with Paul Weiss with the $40 million of pro bono services is a perfect example of how he's neutralizing a firm. And in the process, he's absolutely terrifying the entire profession. So I think the lawyers are a big target for him.
Yeah.
Anyway, so to go forward on this, you mentioned uh, that um, Trump is trying to attack seniors by attacking the benefits they might get from Social Security. But I think it's a calculated choice that he makes. He doesn't care about seniors. He's not sure they vote for him. He cares about the ones who would enjoy Schadenfreude to see the seniors in the street. And I mean, that's really horrendous from a humanity point of view. But I think he's made a choice that he doesn't care. He doesn't care about many groups. It's not the same thing as scapegoating, but it is the same thing as scapegoating. Is I don't care for you. I will not protect you. And I will do better if I get a group together who doesn't care about you also. And I am going to appeal to them. And remember, we all talked about this in the first administration about how he divided the country, right? And there were arguments among all these people. I remember right after his election in 2017, in January of 2017, there were two protests in New York near the Plaza Hotel at the southeast corner of Central Park on different sides of the street. One protest was "Not my president," and the other protest is "Trump is great." Come to find that through Putin, Trump was behind both protests. He was trying to exacerbate the division. And he did that all through his first term, and he's doing it now. So what you see is a calculated attempt to divide people. And what you see is a calculated attempt to create and control public opinion by way of the press. And what you see is a calculated attempt to deprive people of the lawyers they might use to protect their rights. I mean, this has really got every badge of the 30s all over it. And he's making progress. But let me go back to my question. Are there signs here? And I'm thinking of the town hall meetings.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the protests. Are there signs here that suggest that people in general are realizing it and that they are finding the decency that Trump would like us not to find? And they are finding a way to deal with him and to protect themselves and the society and the democracy. Is there a trend? Is there a dynamic that suggests that he is not sustainable in these efforts?
Yes, I think there is. But as you just said, it is difficult to quantify it because, one, if you go to polls, and we depend on polls for a lot for what we think is happening, polls are biased in tremendous numbers of ways, intentionally or otherwise. And polls can be either manipulated or can be wrong just because of circumstances. So it is very difficult for us to know, particularly because there's a very strong, hardcore right wing superstructure or infrastructure to stage the polls and then report on the polls. So what's actually happening is difficult to know. What we do see are the more overt expressions of protest. And again, we are dependent upon media to let us know that these are happening. And sometimes they can be very small groups of people, but on camera, they can look bigger than they really are, and vice versa. Um, polls, Trump used constantly his rallies to show his purported strength. Trump used his rallies where people stood in line for hours to get in to be in his presence. Trump was surrounded by the adoring millions, and they were cheering and they were wearing red hats and red t-shirts and blah, blah. And all of that is very manipulatable to the point where you can't really gauge what it was like, because you could see one view of a rally and it was jammed with people, and you could see another view of the same rally and it's empty seats everywhere. So we don't know. And the Trump the Trump side constantly harped on millions come to see him and millions love him. We never really knew how many went to see him and knew about him. And so that's why it's difficult for us to know what's really going on. We do see very heartening stories of, as I pointed out earlier, people who have come to the realization that they're now being harmed. They've come to the realization that this was a terrible idea to support Trump. But again, those are anecdotal, one person at a time thing. So it's very difficult for us to know, particularly because, as you said, more and more control is being exerted over the media. More and more suppression is happening. So it's hard for us to know. At the moment, we still have a very active, thriving online situation where we can go to a lot of different people to hear, I'll admit, what we want to hear. But again, it's very hard to know this, to know exactly what's going on because of the manipulation. Now, to get back to what you said about this unfortunate woman who was held in detention for 12 days without being told what was going on and why this was happening, this is very much a wartime scenario. This is what happened abundantly during World War II. Here in the Hawaiian Islands, and this is a very apt thing to bring up, the military took over the civilian government within a few hours of the attack by Japan on December 7th, 1941. They suspended civilian rights, and it was a military dictatorship, literally, in which people come to your house without telling you anything and literally take you away. And they put you in detention. You cannot communicate with anybody. You have no legal rights anymore. They've been suspended. You can't tell your family where you are. You don't know what's going on with you. And again, it's how they chose you, you don't even know. And then they put you in a concentration camp and keep you there for as long as they want, based on your race, based on your ethnicity, based on where your ancestors came from or the country that you came from, because those countries are now the bad guys that we're at war with. We have the right to do this to you. This is what we're going towards with the control, as you said, the legal side of our entire existence, and not just lawyers, but judges, who are on the side of the dictator, judges who are in line with it because they know either they support them or they know if I don't support them, I'll be kicked out. So you break down that legal protection, and you break down the right to have legal representation, and you break down the right to be told why you're being detained and what's happening with you and what they're doing to you. And again, that starts to make everybody scared to where they don't want to speak up, because they know they can be taken away, literally. They know the secret police will come and get them, or they know that roving bands of murderers will come to where they live and just pull them out and machine gun them if they feel like it. And if that's the situation, you just struggle to survive as quietly as possible without making any noise or anything against the ruling whatever, because you're literally scared of potentially being either put in jail forever or murdered.
Let's go to something that I've been thinking about. If Hitler had left the stage, in the late 30s, early 40s, would Germany have continued to do what it was doing under him? No. If Mussolini, the same. Huh? If Stalin, the same. And I offer you the question of what would happen. Is Trump really sustainable? I mean, he's getting old, and there are signs of his decline, both mentally and physically. And some of the things we've been talking about reflect a decline mentally, for sure. But if he was not there, would these processes, these threats, these possibilities continue in his absence? Or would it return like a yo-yo to where it started?
You see me smiling because I'm taking pleasure in the thoughts of destruction and ending of all of this. And the reason I'm thinking that way is because it is very difficult when you have a figurehead, cult of personality leader, as Trump is, to sustain that after that person loses power, dies, becomes incapacitated, whatever. Because behind the scenes, there are always cracks in that entire machine. There are personality conflicts. This person wants more power. This person wants to kick that person out. They are not all of one uniform mind. They're fighting with each other. Elon Musk has enemies within Trump's circles. Uh, Elon Musk has enemies, and he is also at the same time angry at other people within Trump's circle. So as soon as something happens, as soon as there's some kind of break, then you can have the disillusion, then you can have the collapse into disarray. We can hope for that. There are times when the powerful leader dies, and yet the dynasty or the regime manages to continue anyway. But the more adulation you put upon that central figure, the more difficult it is to carry that on, because once that person is gone, suddenly everything splits apart and it's not as easy to do anymore. So that could be the way we're heading. Yes, Trump is fallible. Trump is still a human being and who's 78 years old. And he's not healthy. He's not mentally or physically healthy. It's very obvious that he isn't. He's not going to live forever. When he dies, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it isn't going to be a smooth, seamless transition. It's going to become difficult. And that's even always possible, even without him going away. It's always possible that some renegade group or individual is going to break off and say, I've come to my senses. I'm not going to support this anymore. Or I want power. I want to kick him out. And then there's going to be factionalism. If it gets to the point, and this, what usually happens in a lot of situations is that the military in a country will rebel against or overthrow the strongman leader. And that sometimes means that you then go to, fortunately, a situation where civil rights are restored, or it means you just trade it for yet another continuation of the dictatorship. So we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know which one of these scenarios is going to play out. But one of them is. And in the United States, one of the whole safeguards against the ever continuing political dictatorship is the fact that everybody's got a 4-year time in which they can rule. And then at the end of that time, there has to be another election. And we also have the constitutional amendment that says you can have no more now than 2 consecutive terms, although it's openly being threatened as going to be overthrown or just ignored. And Trump will run again at the end of his 4 years if he makes it that long. So we don't know what all of this stuff is going to happen. And let's be really open here and always keep in mind, this man's only been in power for a short time. In theory, he's got 4 years and he's only been destroying things and causing chaos for the last few months. So we have no idea how bad it could get. We have no idea what kind of break there could be. We have no idea if there will be a rebellion by some smaller group or from the military or whatever, or the country breaking apart of individual states seceding from the union because they won't deal with Trump anymore. We have no idea what's going to be coming to us in the future because this is so chaotic.
Yeah, you said disarray, but it's really chaos. It's chaos if he stays in office and then tries to extend his term beyond 2028 somehow. and it's chaos if he can't do that. And you have all these people who don't particularly get along with each other fighting. You have a divided government, a divided country. That's his legacy. And either way, it's very threatening. I don't think people realize how threatening it is. I don't think people realize that we've already, in so many ways, we've crossed the Rubicon. I don't think people realize that it's not so easy to get back, even if a lot of people, jump ship from his base. Anyway, we'll have to leave it there, DeSoto. Thank you so much, DeSoto Brown, historian. I'm Jay Fidell, host of Global Connections. We've been discussing who is supporting Trump these days. Thanks to our viewers for watching. We'll see you again soon for the next one. Aloha.